Hello from Tom's DIY Garage. If we've not met before, my name's Tom. Welcome. Glad to have you here. And if this is not your first time, you're coming back, glad to have you here as well. All are welcome here. As the name suggests, DIY is all about doing it yourself, things that you can accomplish. There's great satisfaction doing work for yourself. Sometimes there are money savings in doing it yourself. All of the above is perfectly acceptable. And even if you've got another reason for doing it yourself, uh, that's pretty cool too. Let me hear from it. I would love to hear what your reasons are. Meantime, so far on our little journey together, we've done a variety of things. We've recounted some home improvement projects. I rebuilt a bathroom in an older house that I used to live in. We have done some organizational projects here in the workshop. Still plenty more of those to go. We have made some furniture. We made a Adirondack chair, which I thought was pretty cool. And we've done some small electric improvement type stuff. Really easy stuff that you can do it yourself without running into any trouble. This time, we're going to do a little arts and crafts, if you'll allow me here. There are so many things that you can make. I get a lot of inspiration from YouTube. I get a lot of inspiration from Pinterest. I'm on Pinterest. Sue me. I think it's got some great resources. And if you're on Pinterest too, then yeah, let's connect. That's pretty cool. So this particular project that we're going to make, whether you want to make it because you like to make knickknacks, or you want to make them as gifts, or you want to sell them, this is a pretty cool one here. We're going to make this time this cool wooden star. Yeah, this is super simple. And it's not expensive at all. There is maybe $4 worth of material in this. And not a whole lot of time investment involved. Additionally, it's got this cool weathered, I think it's cool, weathered wood sort of finish. Also, super easy, super cheap, reasonable. And you don't have to go to a big box store and get a can of some kind of fancy finish. And there's a place for those. This is not one of them. And I'll show you how to do both of those things on this particular episode of Tom's DIY Garage. So let's start with the star here. This comes from a YouTuber, a Canadian fellow, who has a channel called Savvy Builds. Savvy, S-A-V-V-Y, Builds. I don't know what his name is because I've not seen any of the stuff where he said, hey, my name is, whatever it is. But he makes a lot of cool things. And this is his Texas Star, one of several Texas Star designs. And I'll get into why this is one versus some of the others when we get deeper into this, because it involves some equipment choices. And so I made this one because that fits into the equipment that I have available to me. Again, I'll explain. But again, the YouTube channel that took a look at this, it caught my eye, Savvy Builds Texas Star.
Hello everyone, welcome to another Texas Star build video. In this video, I will be showing you how to make this star using a maximum of 45-degree angles. I made a previous video where I made that style of star, which looks very similar, but they're slightly different. That one uses 54-degree angles. After making the video, I realized that some of you might have a miter saw that only goes to 45 degrees. And I actually did end up getting a few comments like that. So I thought I'd make this video. I did some math, I figured out the angles. So if your saw only goes to 45-degree angles, then watch this video and I'll show you how I made this.
To make the star, you could use scrap lumber if that's something you've got laying around your particular workshop and you wanted to use it. Or you could go to the big box lumber store and get a piece of wood. Ultimately, though, what you're looking for is a piece of 1 by 4. That's 1 inch by 4 inches wide. In reality, the dimensions are 3/4 of an inch by 3.5 inches. There's a reason for that. That's a completely separate conversation, perhaps a different Tom's DIY Garage a little further on down the road. But just remember, you need a 1 by 4. This particular piece is 8 feet long. It cost me $8. It's pine. I can get at least a couple stars out of this, maybe more. To get a visual idea of where we're going with this, imagine This is the wood that we're cutting. We'll start by making a 45-degree angle cut at one end. Then we'll make a measurement and we'll make another 45-degree angle cut right there. So you're left with a diamond-shaped piece of wood. Then there are two more cuts that you make at one end of this diamond. It's a little shallower. It's 31.5 degrees, and they are made relative to each other. And after you make all of this stuff go away, you are left with a piece of wood that looks like that. You'll need 5 of those. 5 of those make the star. Ideally and most easily, you're going to use a miter saw to make the cuts for this particular project. You could do it by hand. You could do all those measurements. It'll be a whole lot more work. I'm going to stick with the machine if you don't mind. You'll recall that I mentioned that this designer, Savvy Builds, has a couple of different designs to accommodate the limitations of some equipment. Here's what I meant by that. Some miter saws are designed to make much wider cuts than others, some as wide as 60-degree angle cuts. With those particular types of saws, you can make a star that resembles a much more traditional one, like this decoration that I have. You'll notice that the horizontal lines on these two peaks are more horizontal, as opposed to some saws, which are limited at 45-degree angles, which is the design that we're using. My saw only goes up to 50 degrees, so somewhere in the middle. But from those shorter, more shallow angles, those 45-degree angles, you get a star like the one that we're making. And the top lines on these two peaks, you'll notice they angle down just a little bit. Still very attractive, but able to make a star with the equipment that you have. Let's make some cuts. Now that 45-degree angles are cut, it's time for the shallower 31.5-degree angle that I mentioned. I'm using a stop block on my miter saw. Perhaps you've heard the term, maybe you've never heard the term. In this particular instance, it does a couple of things. You take the piece and it locks it in place relative to the blade so that you get a consistent cut. And that piece kind of resists the potential of wiggling around and screwing things up. Additionally, since we're making several of these cuts, you don't have to keep remeasuring every time. You've got this kind of locked in, so you just put the piece that you're cutting and it's ready to go every single time. And after 16 pretty easy cuts, these are the building blocks for the star. From here, the rest is pretty easy. If you put all of the short sides of those pieces together and adjust them just a little bit, you will be left with a star. Before we do anything else, though, we've got to do every woodworker's favorite job, sanding the pieces. Here's a tip for sanding, especially projects like this where there are a bunch of pieces with some funky angles, if you'll let me use that term, especially this 31.5-degree angle. There is no marking on the miter saw, so there was some guesstimation involved. And you may find that when you try to put the pieces together, it doesn't fit tightly. So if you find that's the case, go ahead and take the sander and pay some extra attention on an edge or a corner or something that is protruding just a little bit and binding up and keeping the pieces from fitting together. And then if you do that gently enough and enough times, you can kind of work all the pieces in. Additionally, it's hard to see, but I have sanded all of the corners of these pieces. Just like, you get a good look right there. What that will do when we put all of the pieces together is provide a little bit of depth to the star, especially when that stain goes on. To join the star together, I will glue all of the interior sides. This is a real strong glue, as I've used in the past, and a thin bead that I'll spread along on all of the sides, and then take 2. 3, 2. To join the star together, I will glue all of the pieces together. Thin bead of glue. This is a real strong Titebond 3 is the brand. I really like it. On each of those interior sides, spread it out with my finger so that when you join the pieces together, there's lots of glue surface to bind to each other, bind to the wood. I'll also wrap the circumference of the star with some painter's tape just to kind of hold those pieces in place while the glue is wet so it doesn't shift at all. And then I'll also put a couple of weights, in this case some wood, on top of the star just to keep those pieces from maybe shifting upwards so that it's nice and flat. Once the glue is dry, a star born. I think all the pieces came together pretty nicely. I think it looks nice. If you agree or you don't agree, go ahead, let me know. We could leave it like this and just be finished and say, hey, I made a star, and be done with it, but we're not going to do that. Number 1, it's kind of plain looking. Number 2, it's not very creative. And number 3, most importantly, I did promise a simple and easy and inexpensive refinishing process that mimics a weathered look without the weathering required. For that, we need 3 simple ingredients. We're going to have some very strong black tea, and then we're going to have a mixture of vinegar and steel wool. If you have never heard of this particular process, it's really neat, and it involves just some minor chemistry so that we understand what's happening. Let's start by spilling the tea on the tea so that we can discuss what it adds to the process. First of all, you don't need a whole lot of tea because a little bit goes a long way, and it doesn't keep very well unless you take pains to refrigerate it, kind of like a jug of iced tea, for example. But my particular batch started as 2 cups of boiling water and 4 tea bags. I let it steep for a good long while, a couple hours at least, to make sure it was as strong as possible. I let it cool, and then it's ready to go. So what the tea does is add tannins to the wood. Those tannins react with the weather, kind of like your cedar fence around your backyard, for example. The longer it sits outside, it reacts with the weather and it kind of turns gray. Those are the tannins in that wood. So with our particular project, this pine wood, it doesn't have a lot of natural tannins. So the tea adds that to the mixture. The application is very simple. You just take a brush and dip it into your tea and brush it on to the wood all over the place. So you paint it on. And don't be alarmed if it doesn't seem like there's a lot of color change just yet. That will come later. But once you put it on the wood, you brush it there, and then you'll let it sit for an hour. The vinegar combined with the steel wool is where the real magic happens in this weathered wood refinishing look that we're going after. Starting with the steel wool, for example, I learned with this that there are different grades of steel wool. The finer the grade, the fewer impurities, the less junk that it has in it. So on Amazon, for example, you can find 0000 grade steel wool. That's the finest grade. It's not expensive at all, but it has the fewer and fewest impurities. So you'll take a couple pieces of the steel wool in about 16 ounces of vinegar, combine them in a glass container like a mason jar, and you don't want to seal it up because the chemical process that's happening here, as this oxidizes this, rusts the steel wool, it creates hydrogen, which is harmless if it gets a little bit into the air completely. It's already there, but if you seal it up tight, that could be problematic. But you'll seal not sealed. You'll put these in that glass container for about 24 hours minimum, maybe a few days. The more you soak it, the more rust, the more oxidation of the steel wool happens, and the darker the color you will get. This was mine. So here's another interesting thing. The vinegar you use, let me put it like that, the vinegar you use changes the color quality of the project. White vinegar gives you a light gray. Apple cider vinegar, which is what this is a darker gray, and balsamic vinegar will give you a warm wood tone sort of thing. So depending on what you're going after, that's the kind of vinegar that you will use. Once the tea has dried on our star, that's when we can add the oxidized vinegar that we made. Its acidic quality will interact with the tannins that are in the wood, or in this case, the tannins that we added with the tea. So let me show you here. You brush it on, and immediately that interaction starts turning the wood on the star a little bit of gray color, and this will continue to mature and darken as this vinegar solution dries in the star. There is one final task, attaching this little loop of rope to the back of the star in case somebody would want to hang it as a decoration. Got this staple gun here, and 3 little staples like this to ensure that it does not come loose. Off. Loop. And with that, our Texas star is complete. I really like how the tea that we added to it to add some tannins to the wood, and then the vinegar and steel wool acid stain really did a nice job kind of giving this weathered wood look, which might take a good long time to get naturally, but this we did in between the two, just a couple hours work, and it's a real difference from this lumber that we started with to this look at the end. Of course, we got the loop that you can hang it from a wall, and by the way, you look at this is kind of nasty looking. This is glue squeezed out from putting the pieces together, and since it's the back, I didn't bother really sanding it away because nobody's going to look at that. That's the part they're going to look. So getting to our original source material from YouTube, the Canadian guy who runs his Savvy Builds channel, and look him up. Great. Tell him Tom sent you here from Houston. But one of the things he did is he finished the pieces individually, and then he took a router and he routered the edge of all of these pieces and kind of took it down to the natural wood look. So you've got this look of these lines on where all of the pieces of the wood come together and around the perimeter, kind of gives it an outline look. It's just one of lots of things that you could do to customize these sorts of things with different finishes or maybe designs.
And there it is, a Texas star made with a miter saw that only goes to 45 degrees. It actually turned out really good. I think it's a really simple process of making these stars. I thought the previous video I made was the easiest way to make a star, but I think this way is actually even easier. I'm probably going to go with this process from now on.
This is something that you could make for gifts. This is something you could make to sell, or you could just put a bunch of stars in your own house. I'd also be interested in doing some of the math and maybe using some wider dimension wood to see how we might make a larger star with these same angles. This particular one is 13.5 inches wide. These larger dimensions, I'd guess, I don't know, 22, 24 inches. So something to think about if you want to make a variety of different sizes. I give that to you. It's about doing it yourself and then coming away and saying, hey, I made that. So some food for thought for you. And it's what we did here. I want to hear from you. Did you make the star? Will you make the star? You got some ideas of things you'd like me to do, or maybe some challenges maybe you can't quite find the answer to. Maybe I can try to find the answers. Hit me up. Email, Facebook, Twitter/X. I check all of them while we figure out what we do next in Tom's DIY Garage. I'll see you next time.